There is no single move that works on every woman. I need to say that up front, because if you clicked on this expecting one secret technique that unlocks every woman, the same way that technique doesn't exist. Anyone selling you that is selling you something that doesn't hold up. But here's what does exist. One thing that actually does work consistently, regardless of who she is. And almost nobody's using it correctly. It's not a move. It's not a position. It's something most men have heard of, but never actually applied the way it's meant to be applied. And once you understand it, you'll realize why so much of the foreplay advice you've picked up over the years has only worked some of the time, and why this works basically every time. Stick with me. This is going to change how you approach the entire lead up to intimacy. Introduction and Authority, 15213. I'm Janice Powell, a men's sex therapist, and I've helped men build real, lasting confidence in this part of their lives. Today, we're breaking down why fixed techniques fail as often as they succeed, what actually works regardless of who you're with, and exactly how to apply it step by step in real situations. Let's start with why technique alone was never going to be the answer. The deep dive. Why technique fails. Here's the uncomfortable truth behind most foreplay advice. It's written for an average woman, and an average woman doesn't exist. Every how-to list you've ever read describes what worked for one person in one study on one occasion, then generalizes it as if it applies universally. But arousal research consistently shows enormous individual variation. What produces a strong response in one woman can do nothing for another. And what one woman finds arousing today, she may respond to differently next week, depending on stress, hormonal cycle, and emotional state. This is why a fixed technique, no matter how well it's described, has a ceiling. It might work, it might not. You're essentially guessing dressed up as expertise. So what actually holds up across the research, regardless of who you're with? Responsiveness. Not a specific move, but your ability to read what's happening and adjust to it in real time. Across relationship and sex research, the variable most consistently linked to better outcomes isn't which specific act a couple engaged in. It's how attentively partners responded to each other's real-time signals. Couples who adjusted based on actual feedback reported significantly higher satisfaction than those following a fixed sequence, regardless of what that sequence was. There's a second piece that gets skipped constantly. Most foreplay advice jumps straight to a specific technique, a move, a spot, a sequence, without addressing arousal as a whole body, gradual process. Research on arousal consistently shows that broader, full body touch and unhurried buildup outperforms jumping straight to a specific target. Because arousal isn't a switch, it's a slope. Skipping the slope and going straight for the peak is one of the most common reasons foreplay doesn't work. Not because the technique was wrong, but because the process was rushed. The research doesn't support a universal move. It supports a universal process. Build gradually, read her specific response, adjust accordingly. That process works regardless of who she is, because it isn't built around her being like anyone else. It's built around paying attention to exactly who she is. That might sound less exciting than the one move that works on everyone, but it's the actual answer. And once you understand why it works, you'll never go back to guessing. To be clear, this doesn't mean specific techniques are useless. It means they're secondary. A technique applied with real attentiveness can work beautifully. The same technique applied on autopilot without reading her response often falls flat. The technique was never the deciding factor. The attentiveness behind it was. Now, if you're realizing that real results here come from understanding the bigger picture, not just memorizing moves, that's exactly why I created the Vital Reset program. Because learning one technique at a time isn't enough. You need to understand your body, your health, your confidence, your habits, and the everyday factors that shape your intimate performance all together, not piecemeal. The Vital Reset program brings all of that into one clear step-by-step system. I've left the link in the description and pinned comment if you want to go deeper. For now, let's get back to what actually makes this process work. Let's talk about why responsiveness works when fixed technique doesn't, because the answer is almost entirely psychological. When a woman feels like she's being genuinely paid attention to not run through a routine, but actually observed and responded to it, reduces something researchers call performance pressure. The low-grade self-consciousness a lot of people carry into intimate moments, worrying about how they look, how they're responding, whether they're doing it right on their end too. That pressure matters more than most men realize. When it's present, even in the background, it competes directly with arousal for the same mental bandwidth. Reduce the pressure, and arousal has room to build that it simply didn't have before. This is also where feeling unhurried becomes clinically significant, not just pleasant. A slower, attentive pace signals at a nervous system level that there's no agenda being run. That signal is associated with a more relaxed physiological state, which is consistently linked to easier arousal and higher reported satisfaction. Compare that to the fixed technique approach. Even when the technique itself is correct, if it's applied without attentiveness, it can register as impersonal, technically present, but not truly responsive to her. And impersonal touch, even skilled impersonal touch, doesn't produce the same psychological safety that genuinely attentive touch does. This is the actual mechanism behind why the one thing that works isn't a move. Attentiveness expressed through pacing, checking in, adjusting creates psychological safety. Psychological safety is what reliably produces arousal regardless of the specific physical acts involved. The acts are almost secondary to the process producing them. Once you see it this way, never fails starts to make sense. It's not that one specific move never fails. It's that attentiveness applied consistently essentially can't fail because it isn't dependent on guessing right. It adapts by design. Practical application. Here's how to actually apply this. Start broad, not targeted. Resist the urge to go straight for what you assume is the spot. Build arousal across her whole body first. This isn't wasted time. It's the foundation everything else builds on. Watch before you assume. Before settling into a rhythm or technique, pay attention to what's already producing a response. Breathing changes, movement toward your touch, tension releasing. Let her real-time signals guide where you go next, rather than a plan you walked in with. Ask, don't guess. A simple, "Does this feel good?" or "Want more of this?" isn't a mood killer. Research consistently shows the opposite. Explicit check-ins are linked to higher reported satisfaction, not lower. Silence isn't more sensual, it's just riskier. Adjust and stay adjusting. This isn't a one-time calibration. What's working can shift minute to minute. Keep observing throughout, not just at the start. Slow down more than feels necessary. Almost every account of foreplay not working traces back to rushing moving to the next thing before the current thing has actually built. Slower, sustained attention consistently outperforms speed. This is the actual process behind never fails. Not a move, a method, one that works because it's built to adapt to her specifically. Every single time. It's worth being honest about why this feels harder than following a fixed technique. It requires attention instead of memorization. A checklist is easier than genuinely watching someone, but that's exactly why so few men do it well and exactly why it's the differentiator. The bar isn't as high as it feels. Most of what's required is simply staying present instead of running on autopilot, which is a habit, not a skill you need years to build. The missing piece. Let's talk about what failing actually looks like, because it's rarely what men assume. Men often assume foreplay fails because they picked the wrong move or didn't know some advanced technique. In practice, that's rarely the real cause. The most consistent driver of dissatisfaction identified in relationship research isn't technical. It's rushing, assuming instead of asking, and disengaging emotionally, even while remaining physically present. Here's a distinction worth sitting with. Physical presence and genuine attentiveness aren't the same thing. You can be doing all the right physical actions while your attention is somewhere else entirely, on your own performance, on what comes next, on autopilot. She can feel that, even if she can't always name it. This is also where a lot of failure actually starts before anything physical happens at all. If there's unspoken assumption instead of communication, assuming she wants what worked with someone else, assuming silence means consent. Assuming her mood hasn't shifted since last time, the entire process is already working against itself before a single touch happens. The fix isn't more technique. It's staying present enough to notice and secure enough to ask. Those two things, done consistently, are what actually produce the never fails result. The title promises not a specific act, but a way of showing up that adapts every time, because it was never dependent on guessing right in the first place. There's no single move that works on every woman, but there is a process that does. We covered why fixed technique has a ceiling, because individual variation is real and constant. We covered why responsiveness, reading her signals, and adjusting in real time consistently outperforms any routine. We covered the psychology behind it. Attentiveness reduces performance pressure and builds the safety that arousal actually depends on. And we covered the practical version. Start broad, watch before you assume, ask instead of guessing, and slow down more than feels necessary. That process is the thing that never fails. Not because it's magic, but because it was built to adapt to her, whoever she is, every single time. If this changed how you think about foreplay, imagine having that same clarity across your whole intimate life. Your body, your confidence, your habits, all working together instead of guessing one piece at a time. That's exactly why I created the Vital Reset program. Linked below if you're ready to go deeper. Subscribe and turn on notifications. There's a lot more coming. Leave a comment and tell me what you want covered next. I read every one. Thank you for trusting me with this conversation today. I am Janice Powell. I'll see you in the next one.